So in this section, I'd like to talk about the sliding window mechanism. And the sliding window, ultimately what it governs is how much data the sender can have outstanding or unacknowledged at one time. That's the high-level overview of the sliding window. And keep that in mind as we move throughout here. It's all about, as a sender, how many bytes can I already have transmitted that I haven't gotten acknowledgement for yet? What's the maximum quantity of that? That is determined by the sliding window. So let's go through this. So we know that once a TCP connection is finally established, the data transfer can take place. We know that the maximum quantity of data I can ever send to the receiver is dictated by his receive window size. I can't send any more than that. I can certainly send less than that, but I can't send more than that. Now let me just take a moment here to explain that last concept, because that's very critical. I might tell you during our three-way handshake, I might tell you that I'm capable of handling up to 20,000 bytes at one time. As a matter of fact, in some of the sniffer traces we saw previously that I actually did live, the server was telling us it could handle well over 65,000 bytes at one time. As a matter of fact, it had a window scale of 8, so it was some massively huge number. The server was saying, hey, look, if you want to, you could send me hundreds of thousands of bytes at one time. I have plenty of memory to store all that. Now you, as the client, high probability that you're probably not going to send that in one big chunk for a couple of reasons. Number one, when TCP starts up, it starts up slowly and building up in the process. Now let's think about, once again, from the server to the client, because after all, that's probably the direction the data is going to transfer. You as the client, unless you're doing an upload, most of the time we're downloading a lot of data, right? So my client is sending up a little, hey, send me something, and then woof, massive stuff comes down. So what's really important is, what's the receive window on my laptop? When I told the server, hey, send me some data, I had to tell that server, but don't send me too much at one time, because I'm just a tiny little laptop here. I'm just a tiny little tablet. I've only got so much I can send. So the server said, okay, once again, let's say the server said, okay, that client has just told me that he can handle 20,000 bytes at most. Now I'm a server, I could handle a lot more than that. But when I'm transferring down to the client can only handle 20,000 bytes maximum at one time. Okay, great. Now, that server, his CPU, once again, that CPU on the server says, okay, transmission control block for Keith's connection, go. So now the server says, okay, I'm in the middle of downloading a web page with a whole bunch of graphics and audio. I got a whole bunch of bytes here. Now maybe at that point, the server says, okay, even though Keith has told me he could handle 20,000 bytes at one time, we've just started this connection. I have not yet ramped up to the point where I can actually send him that in one chunk. Because the way TCP starts, it starts by maybe sending 3 segments, then 6, then 12. And so the server says, okay, right now I'm just starting. So I'll send him 3 segments. I'll send him, let's say, 8,000 bytes worth of data, let's just say. So that is data, what's called in flight. That's data that has not been acknowledged yet. But technically speaking, the send window says, what's the maximum I can have in flight at one time? Well, he says, okay, well, the receiver has told me technically he can handle 20,000 bytes at one time, so my entire send window is that. The server says, even though I haven't sent 20,000 bytes right now, because we're just starting up slowly and ramping up, that's the theoretical maximum I could send to Keith's laptop, 20,000 bytes. So in this particular case, the send window is equaling the receive window. Now let's go ahead and see how this takes place here in this animation. So in order to conceptualize this window concept, we have to remember that as bytes come into TCP, TCP sort of classifies all the bytes it knows about as one of 4 things. Bytes sent and acknowledged. So these bytes TCP only knows about for a split second. If I've got 100 bytes that I've sent and all of a sudden an acknowledgement comes back, for a split second I'll say, okay, these are acknowledged, but then I'll strip them off the retransmission queue, forget about them. I don't have to remember them at that point. So the bytes that fall into the first category here are just classified like that for a split second, and then they're gone. Now the remaining 3 can be holding around for a while. Bytes sent, but not yet acknowledged. Okay, so like it sounds, those are bytes for which I've sent, and I'm waiting for an acknowledgement. And how long it takes for that acknowledgement to come back is dependent on a lot of things. The latency of the network, how much CPU power the client has to respond back with an ACK. Bytes not yet sent for which the recipient is ready. So that's like that example I talked about where my laptop told the server, hey server, I can handle up to 20,000 bytes at a time. The server said, okay, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. We're building up right now, but we haven't built up to that yet. So the server said, look, I'll send you 4,000 bytes. And I know you're telling me you can handle another 16,000, you can handle 20,000 total, but I'm not going to send you those 16,000 yet because we haven't built up to that point yet. So those 16,000 bytes are being held in reserve. Technically, I'm ready for that. I can handle that. That's the third category, but he hasn't sent it yet because he hasn't maybe ramped up to that point yet. And then there's bytes not yet sent for which the recipient is not ready, right? That's above and beyond the 20,000 that I could actually handle at any one time. So the sliding window mechanism really is dictating this is the key concept. When a person's transmitting bytes, what's the maximum amount of bytes that could be out on the wire and unacknowledged at one time? That window is going to be sliding as bytes are coming in and bytes are going out. That window is going to be moving around. And that window is composed of bytes sent but not yet acknowledged and bytes not yet sent for which the recipient is ready. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Three-way handshake. Now, I flashed past that three-way handshake because I made a mistake in that slide, but the main thing that think about is in that three-way handshake, the recipient said he was willing to take 8 bytes at a time. Okay, 8 bytes. So let's just in the three-way handshake, that was the receive window. Okay, now in the transmitter, the server that's about to transmit a whole bunch of stuff, he's just gotten 16 bytes from the upper layer process. He says, okay, in my mind, I know that the receiver could potentially get these 8 bytes right here. Bytes not sent for which the recipient is ready. That is my usable window. However, I can't get to that point yet. Remember, TCP starts slow and then builds up. So right now, this whole thing is my send window. He says, technically speaking, if I wanted to, I could send all 8 of these bytes out, stop and pause, and that's the maximum I could send out right now without getting an acknowledgement, would be those 8 bytes. So that green window, keep that in mind, the green window is going to dictate what is the maximum quantity of unacknowledged outstanding bytes I can have. Now, because we're ramping up slowly, the server says, well, I'm going to start out by just sending 4 bytes, and that's it, and see how he does with that. So remember, my send window said at maximum I could have 8 bytes outstanding at any one time, but I only sent half of that. I only sent 4. So now what I've got here is my sliding window is now composed of 2 things. Remember, before I sent that, my sliding window was actually composed of 1 category of traffic, usable window. All 8 bytes were fit into that 1 category of traffic, bytes not yet sent for which the recipient is ready. Now that I've sent half of them, my sliding window, my send window, is now composed of 2 different categories of traffic. Once again, the maximum I could have outstanding would be 8 bytes, but I haven't sent 8 yet. I've only sent 4. So in my window, I've got 4 bytes which have been sent but not acknowledged, and I've still got another 4 bytes which have not been sent, but the recipient is ready. So that's the key thing here. The send window is telling TCP, if you've got anything in your buffers, can you send it, or do you have to hold on to it? So right now the sliding window is saying, okay, actually, I could send these 4 bytes. The recipient is ready for it. So my sliding window says, yep, I could do that. Now you might hear some of these terms of left side of window and right side of window. So just keep that in mind. The left side of window is dictating what is the, in time, what is the first byte you sent that has not been acknowledged yet, and what is the last byte you received from the sending application that you could send right now, but you haven't sent it yet. Left side and right side of window. Okay, so now the receiving application who got those 4 bytes, he sent an acknowledgement for that. But notice in his acknowledgement, he says, my window size has shrunk to only 3 bytes. Now that actually should be changed right here as well. I didn't change the animation for that, but imagine that on this right side here, the animation shrunk from 8 bytes down to 3. Okay, well the first 4 bytes now that they've been acknowledged, fall into the byte sent and acknowledged category. So those are forgotten. Let's just imagine those vanish, they disappear. Now remember the send window. What did the send window indicate? The sliding window, the send window, indicated how many bytes could at the most be transmitted and outstanding at one time. Well, previously he thought, hey, I had another 4 bytes I could send. The guy initially told me he could handle 8. I sent him half of that, so I still had 4 left. But now he's telling me 3. So my send window at this point shrinks down to 3 bytes. Because right now, at this point in time, this is the maximum quantity of bytes that I could send and have unacknowledged. Now if I did that, let's just go ahead and pull this over here for a second. I know this is going to look a little bit sloppy, but let's get rid of the animations for a moment. Go home. Okay. Okay, so here we are at this point in time right now. And this has been moved up here. He now has a window size of 3 bytes. And so our send window has now shrunk down to this. This is sort of the poor man's way of doing animation right here. Okay, so now imagine that I sent bytes. So these are gone. Now imagine I sent bytes 5 and 6 next. So these are transmitted down to the receiver. How's that going to affect my window? All right, so bytes 5 and 6 are now no longer part of the usable window. The usable window has now shrunk to just, in this case, it's kind of crazy, but just 1 bit. And these bytes here, 5 and 6, now fall into the category of window already sent. Remember, window already sent is bytes that have been sent but unacknowledged. I'm kind of finding it kind of hard here to fit all this in. Window already sent. That is this category right here. What is that? Just 1 second. So the moral of this story, what's all this trying to point out? A couple of things. Number one, this window here, the send window, why do we call it the sliding window? Because as bytes are sent and acknowledged, it's going to slide over to the right. Right? The send window is going to slide over as more of these bytes in our buffer become available for us to send. The other part is that at any given point in time, the send window could be composed of one category of traffic or two. But it's never going to be composed of any more than that. Right now it's being composed of two categories of traffic. 2 bytes that have been sent, and I'm waiting for an acknowledgement, and 1 byte, which is in my usable window. I could send it right now because he's ready for it. And now if I send it, if I take that and I send that last byte down, that's what happens when I'm trying to do things fast. There we go. Let's forget about the color purple in the moment. We don't really need that for anything. Okay, so now bytes 4, 5, and 6 have been sent. My send window has not changed. It's still composed of bytes 4, 5, and 6, but now I no longer have any usable window. There's no more bytes that are ready and waiting to be sent for which the recipient is ready. That's gone. At this point, all the bytes that I have, 4, 5, and 6, now fall into just a single category of traffic. Bytes sent, but not yet acknowledged, which is also called window already sent. Now, if I get an acknowledgement for all of these, if I get an acknowledgement for all 3 of these, then guess what? Now my send window can shift. It can slide. Now I can take this send window. Oh, why is it doing that? There we go. Now if I get an acknowledgement for bytes, let's just put that in here. Well, that is a JPEG, but if I get an acknowledgement for bytes 5, 6, and 7, now my sliding window can slide over to here. And now 5 and 6, 7 fall into the bytes sent and acknowledged category. And now bytes 8, 9, and 10 fall into which type of window? Which type of window, what's the name of those bytes now, 8, 9, and 10? Of the 4 categories of traffic that we talked about. Well, that is bytes not yet sent for which the recipient is ready, which is also called our usable window. So my window slid 3 bytes to the right, hence the sliding window. But now the bytes in that window have been recategorized. They're now the usable window, bytes not sent for which the receiver is ready. So remember, that's the whole concept of the send window. The send window is, and I'll just go ahead and write this on here. Well, I would if PowerPoint weren't so finicky right now. Then we'll just do it like this. We'll circumvent PowerPoint entirely. Here's the takeaways from this. The send window, i.e. sliding window, governs the maximum quantity of bytes that can be outstanding, i.e. unacknowledged at any point in time. That's number 1. Number 2, the send window at any point in time can be composed of one or both of the following categories of traffic. Usable window, which is bytes that could be sent right now, or the sent but not act. The send window is governed, and I didn't mention this, but this is a good point. I'd say the maximum size of the send window is the lesser of the receive window of the remote host or the congestion window of the sender. So that last point bears a little bit of explanation. In all the animation that I just did, it was all about the receive window. The receive window was dictating the maximum quantity of bytes I could have outstanding. But there can be times when, and we'll see this coming up, when, for example, if acknowledgments are missed, if data goes out and it never gets acknowledged, the sender might say, well, the receiver said that he could handle up to 8 bytes at a time, but I'm going to shrink my sliding window. I'm going to shrink my send window down to only 4 bytes. I'm only going to allow myself to have a maximum of 4 bytes out at a time because something's wrong out there. I'm not getting stuff acknowledged like I should. So now, what's smaller, the congestion window or the receive window? Well, at this point, the congestion window is smaller. The congestion window is saying, you're limited to 4 bytes. The receive window is saying, hey, I can handle 8. Well, if the congestion window is smaller because we've detected congestion and we've decided to slow down, then the congestion window will dictate the size of the sliding window, of the send window. If there is no congestion and we can keep going and going and going, then the receive window will dictate the size of the sliding window.